I'm looking at this headline and I still can't quite believe I'm seeing this. So, Sky Sports. Will I read you the headline of the article? Oh, let's do it. So, how did... I'm just going to go and I'll give my thoughts in a sec. Derek Chisora is the mandatory challenger for IBF heavyweight champion Daniel Dubois, says promoter Frank Warren. Derek Chisora is the mandatory challenger for the IBF World Heavyweight Champion Daniel Dubois, says Frank Warren. Chisora floored Otto twice to earn a points win in his 49th professional fight in February, which was designated as an IBF title eliminator. Absolutely correct it was. Not a final eliminator though. Derek Chisora is the mandatory challenger for Daniel Dubois, IBF World Heavyweight Champion, says promoter Frank Warren. The British, okay, you've literally just repeated yourself, Sky. Dubois is currently pursuing an undisputed world heavyweight title fight against Alexander Usyk, the unified champion, but the Ukrainian has also been ordered to fulfill WBO mandatory title defense against Joseph Parker. Chisora, an IBF mandatory, promoter Frank Warren told Sky Sports, he won it in his last fight and everyone knew what the fight was going to be for. I don't recall hearing the word final eliminator, Frank, but maybe I'm just short of hearing. He is the mandatory to our man, Dangerous Dan, so that's the position he's in. Martin Bakole was set to fight F.A. Ajagba in an IBF final eliminator, but the Congolese contender is no longer eligible for an eliminator after the second round knockout loss to Joseph Parker in February. Well done to Billy Nelson on that one. Leaving Chisora in pole position to face Daniel Dubois, Chisora was stopped by Tyson Fury in his WBC world title fight in 2022 and has suggested that he will enter retirement after his 50th fight. Warren said he wants a big fight to go out. Eddie Hearn and I have had a couple of chats today, and in due course we will let people know our views on what we'll do. We both have to be involved in his career. He started off with me, been with me for a long time, was with me for his last few fights. We want to deliver the 50th fight. I want to work something between us that both Hearn and Warren walk him out, to end the article there. So, well, Chisora at this stage in his career is a mandatory challenger with the IBF, and they do expedite their mandatories very quickly. Absolutely right in what he says, in one sense, that the fight he had with Otto was an eliminator, and it was. The difference being is it wasn't a final eliminator. Now, how this works, I'll explain. Filip Hrgović 2 years ago was IBF mandatory challenger. All right, he earned that right by beating Zhilei Zhang. He earned that right by beating Zhilei Zhang. Now, fast forward a year later, he hadn't had his shot yet. Bear in mind, he was still mandatory. He hadn't had his crack yet. But a year later, around about September of 23, Otto faced Murat Gassiev. I think they fought in Turkey, if I'm not mistaken, as in the country Turkey, I think Istanbul or somewhere like that. And that was a IBF eliminator, but it wasn't a final eliminator. So the difference is, a final eliminator means you are now the mandatory challenger, as Filip Hrgović was, well, as Derek Chisora is now. But the final eliminator basically means that the winner, he's next in line, he gets his crack. And as we know, the IBF are very good like that when it comes to enforcing mandatories. Now, just a standard eliminator, essentially what it does is it puts you very high up the queue. In Otto case, he was second behind Hrgović. It still doesn't make you mandatory. All right, you got to understand it doesn't make you mandatory, but it puts you in a very good stead. And say there's no interim champion, and say you are second in the rankings, whoever is number one, and the champion vacates, you then are eligible to fight for the vacant title. So you number two against number one, so on and so forth. There you go. That's how it works. Now, with Chisora and Valine, yes, that was an eliminator. So it was to get Chisora a high ranking. And I did touch on this when, actually in the run-up to the Parker-Bakole fight, they said, well, wonder what they do with Chisora, coming off the back of the fact that he had just beaten Otto Valine in an eliminator, and we know now. So, basically, given the fact that Martin Bakole chose to fight Joseph Parker on 48 hours notice, he had probably 5-6 hours sleep, if even. He was grossly out of shape, hadn't trained properly in months, and got knocked out in 2 rounds. That now renders him ineligible to fight in the final eliminator. Now, it doesn't make F.A. Ajagba ineligible. Understand that. It just makes Bacoli ineligible. Ajagba was next available. I assume by Ajagba taking this fight, it therefore makes him essentially ineligible as well. So essentially, Bacoli versus Ajagba, as I feared, has nothing on the line. And the reason why I say as I feared is Bacoli, if he looks really, really good against F.A. Ajagba, he's not going to get a voluntary defence, and he's not in line to fight as a mandatory. So, you've took one step forward in your career, but you may actually have taken two steps back, realistically. And I say you took one step forward, one step forward in terms of payday. You might have taken 10 steps back in terms of actual progression. And he's not getting any younger. I don't necessarily believe he is 33 years old, to be honest with you. So then it falls to Derek Chisora. Now, the issue I have with them just making Chisora mandatory is this, right? In 2021, I think it was 2021. I think it was. Yeah, in fact, I'm sure it was. Filip Hrgović was highly ranked by the IBF, and they ordered him to fight Michael Hunter as an eliminator, as a final eliminator. Then Michael Hunter, we all know what he did. He went to Triller and said, "See you later, I'm not fighting you, I want the big money." And that was that. Okay. It then went to, I believe it might have been Joseph Parker. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know he was one of the names there. No, Joseph Parker. No, see you later. I'm going to go fight Joe Joyce instead. Okay, fair enough. It then went to Tony Yoka, but he was already pre-contracted to fight Martin Bacoli. Best she wishes he didn't do that now. And then it was, okay, we kicked the can down the road again. And then it fell to Zhilei Zhang. But understand, they never... And I remember at the time doing videos saying, just make Hrgović mandatory. I mean, you're just kicking the can down the road and you're going down and down and down the rankings. What happens when you do that is you run the risk of having a final eliminator as just a complete mismatch. Really, you do, if you keep going down the rankings. That's why we've had some bad mandatories in the past with the IBF, like Kevin Bizier when he fought Kell Brook. Ultimately, they settled on Zhilei Zhang. We all know what happened. Hrgović won, disputed, but he won. And, well, again, Dubois is now IBF champion. But they still went ahead and they made sure he fought a final eliminator. Derek Chisora hasn't had to do that. Him being mandatory at this stage, I can't believe it. I did see an article from TalkSport. I didn't read it, but I just saw the headline. And it basically was inferring that should anything happen in the negotiations for Dubois versus Usyk, as in should there be any breakdowns of negotiations if Usyk decides to go and fight Parker, if Dubois is kind of, marooned at sea, he's got no one to fight, Frank is happy to do the mandatory defence, which, God help Derek Chisora fighting Daniel Dubois at this stage in his career. I love Derek Chisora as a fighter. I think he's been, as a character, he's been amazing. He's shown people that your losses don't really make a damn. I mean, who gives a damn how many losses Chisora has? I think he's got 13. But people don't talk about that. He still fills out arenas and people just want to see him fight. He just is that type of character, and he has that just pull sway with the public. So he's shown, I think, a lot of young fighters coming up that they always not everything. It depends on how you lose, and Chisora's always gone out in a shield, always. So, I mean, some people would say maybe he's due a title shot. Frank is talking about him having a big 50th fight, and him and Eddie walking him to the ring. I mean, God only knows. I mean, mandatory crack. I mean, Jesus, could you imagine they give it to Anthony Joshua or something like that? Because you got to bear in mind that once you become mandatory challenger with the IBF, that's always on the line moving forward. So, you could give someone like Anthony Joshua a shot, you could give him a fight, and he beats you, which I think we'd all expect and probably would now at this stage. He then becomes mandatory. So Eddie Hearn could be thinking, oh, happy days. But yeah, it does make Chisora's 50th a little bit more of a, an interesting affair. So let me know your thoughts. Derek Chisora, now IBF mandatory for Daniel Dubois. Unbelievable. Let me know your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed it. Smash the like button. Hit the subscribe button as well if you haven't already. Until next time, people, I'll leave it there. Peace.